Ford's styling department in the 1980s and 90s could be relied on to produce hit after hit. We liked the third generation Fiesta, we loved the Mondeo and the car, and we positively adored the Ford Focus. But in that period, there was one car that stuck out like a sore thumb, the 1994 Ford Scorpio. Executive car buyers like conservative designs, just ask Citroën when they released the Avantgarde C6, and there were pitchfork-wielding mobs of account executives when BMW launched a new Shape 5 Series in 2003. But those cars were all in the future, and Ford thought it had its finger on the pulse of the market when it launched the new Scorpio. They were wrong, very wrong. Steve Saxty has again been very kind to share the story of the disastrous second generation Scorpio from volume 2 of his Secret Fords book. The story of the first generation Scorpio, also known as the Granada, is in volume 1. There's a link in the description if you're interested in learning more. Anyway, without further ado, here's the Ford Scorpio story.
Der Ford Scorpio, einer wie keiner.
If you live in the UK or Ireland, then this car was a Granada, but if you lived on the continent, then it was the original Ford Scorpio. If you lived in North America, you'll know it as the Mercure Scorpio, a 2-year experiment to bring the big car across the Atlantic as something upmarket and exotic. After all, German luxury cars were selling there like hot cakes, well, hot Black Forest Gatto, and this was a luxury car made in Germany. But American customers didn't warm to it. To be fair, European customers didn't start off loving it either for one very important reason. The marketing men had insisted customers in the mid to late 80s wanted a large luxury hatchback. They most definitely did not, and Ford had to pivot to give it a boot. That would take 4 years, and meanwhile the German Big Three continued to eat into Ford's share of the large luxury car market. So much so that when it came to designing the next Scorpio in 1990, it had been decided that this would be the last large luxury car created by Ford of Europe. The next generation would potentially come from 2 places. The first was Ford's new luxury car purchase, Jaguar. In 1990, that company was an inefficient mess, but by the end of the decade, Jaguar would be firing on all cylinders and would produce a large volume car the same size as the Scorpio. The second source was a little less obvious, Lincoln in the USA. Ford's luxury brand was getting its bottom handed to it in its home market, so they produced a new 5 Series and C-Class competitor that would fight back both in North America and maybe also in Europe. But all of this was years away, so until then, Ford's executive car would be the new Scorpio. Well, when I say new, that wasn't exactly true. Ford had given the team just over £300 million, and that wouldn't stretch to an all-new car. But as Ford didn't expect the redesigned Scorpio to live for much more than 4 years, a complete redesign didn't make sense. And the team could be smart with their money as well. First, they could reuse the platform from the existing car, and second, they could reuse the new interior that hadn't actually launched yet. New Scorpio design work had kicked off in 1990, and the new interior wouldn't launch on the old car until 1992, so when the new car launched it would still be fresh. 1990 was when Ford was getting pilloried in the press for the new Escort. It was heavy and the shape was just a little too safe and bland. Ford could win. They took a risk with the Sierra and people were aghast, so they played it safe with the Escort, but that wasn't risky enough. The new Scorpio, and it would be called the Scorpio everywhere, could be risky as it was only going to live for 4 years. This new car could put Ford design back on the map. There was plenty that could be done with that £300 million as well. The team ditched the hatchback, which wasn't selling, leaving just the saloon and the estate, and they could leave the back end of the estate as it was, like they did with the second generation Granada in 1977, because like the interior, it hadn't yet launched on the existing car, so the shape could still be fresh. There would be a new body, new suspension and powertrain improvements, and there were always new parts coming down the line that could be bolted on to produce a better car. Initial sketches were promising with a bold, rounded design. Several of the designers who were working on the car had come from Ford's US Design Center in Dearborn, Michigan, and the shape had a rounded look of a future US Ford Taurus that the team were about to begin styling. Some designs, like this one, even had the look of a future 2000s Pontiac Grand Prix. Then there were more classic front-end treatments like this one with cat-eye headlights that again had a bit of a future Ford Taurus thing going about them. Some of these sketches were shown to a handful of prospective customers to gauge their opinion. That's not many people upon which to base an important decision, but they could give a fresh perspective into Ford's direction. They felt the design with the long band of lights around the rear was okay, and this American look was one which was favoured by the Scorpio's new American chief designer, so this was the one that they went with. Not only the platform, but the doors of the original car were kept to save money. This limited the redesign to a new front and rear treatment with maybe some sprucing up of the sides. The team was going to have to get creative to achieve their new radical look. By 1991, the team had moved on to making full-size clays. There were several designs, but the team liked this one with a vertical light design similar to what would appear on the 2002 Ford Transit Connect. This was refined down to 2 different designs put onto the same car. This was a common practice to reuse the same clay, and designers would put a mirror halfway down the car to see what the whole car would look like. By the summer, the team was zeroing in on the tall light design, but it proved to be too tall to work for all occasions, so the lights were squashed a little and lowered into a single unit. The wide grille was so big it wouldn't have looked out of place on cars today. The sides of the car were bulked up so that the existing doors would work with the new look. The rear featured a twin light design, but this was dismissed as being infeasible. When the boot was shut, the lights had to align precisely or they looked cockeyed, not the best look for a luxury saloon, so something else was needed. The team circled back to the long band of lights that was radical and, more importantly, doable. But it wasn't all about the looks. Ford's engineers were working to improve the handling with new suspension that also included a self-leveling rear setup for the estate. 1992 was spent locking down changes and getting the car ready for production. But in 1993, Ford of Europe had a new chairman, Jack Nasser, and he wanted to put his mark on projects already in development. He decreed the new Scorpio should get a new dashboard to make the interior as modern as the exterior. Not only that, feature creep crept in and the exterior kept getting design changes. What had looked at least acceptable was modified into something that was certainly radical and striking. All those changes meant the existing doors couldn't be used any longer, so new ones had to be designed, adding to the production cost. As the production date loomed, more people got to see the new car, and there must surely have been a moment of, oh my God, what have we done? But by then the car's shape was set in stone. Maybe that moment was when Ford compared the new Scorpio to a BMW 5 Series and Mercedes C-Class in late 1993. The design made it look positively tiny compared to those cars, even though, would you believe, the Scorpio was actually the widest of the 3. There was an attempt at doing small changes to the rear taillights, but by now it was too late to make significant changes. And it got worse. Autocar Car Magazine managed to take some undisguised spy shots of the pre-production car. They didn't believe this was what Ford had ready for production, as it was too ugly. It must be camouflage. I mean, no one would actually design a production car that would look like this, would they? Well, yes they would. The press preview was a really awkward affair. Motor critics agreed it was definitely radical, but certainly not pleasing to the eye. Ford put on a brave face. They compared the smiling mouth design to historic and much prettier cars from Jaguar, Alfa Romeo and Austin Healey. But the press condemnation was nothing to when the Scorpio went public. It didn't help that the launch advert had discordant music. Phrases like droopy nose, stupid grin and gormless mouth were said about the front. Other choice comments were dopey eyes, gargoyle, ugly, and something David Attenborough might reveal from a dank cave in Borneo. The tagline for the new car was, "It's another world." The public agreed, but they'd rather it had steered clear of this planet, thank you very much. There was no name or lettering on the back, presumably as a sign of exclusivity, but it just made the car look as if Ford was ashamed of the monster that they'd created. The look to some was quite American, even down to the door handles that were borrowed from America's police interceptor, the Crown Victoria. The most American part, at least to my eyes, was the rear. This was maybe not surprising given the number of American stylists involved, but it seemed quite out of place on European roads. It looked like Ford had decided to import a Lincoln with scant thought of whether customers on this side of the Atlantic would actually like it. Of course, Ford was actually looking at importing a Lincoln to replace the Scorpio, the LS that would launch in 1999 and built on the same platform as the Jaguar S-Type. The car was supposed to have European looks and it was designed by a German, but the Lincoln LS never made it to Europe. Maybe if the publicity footage showed the new Scorpio only in close-ups, the public would warm to it. After all, there was a lot of new goodness to celebrate. The handling was much improved, there was a new dashboard and more ergonomic seats. The passenger mirror would tilt when reversing to simplify backing up. Important stereo controls were duplicated on one of the stalks. There was improved climate control that could be adjusted for both driver and passenger. The locks got better security in case someone was mad enough to steal your new car. The rearview mirror automatically reduced glare, and the 2-litre engine was now available in 100 horsepower 16-valve form, giving a good balance of performance and economy. And that extra power was needed because the new Scorpio was a lot heavier, 173 kilos. That meant both acceleration and fuel economy took a hit, so with engines that hadn't been updated, the new car was slower than the old model. So it was a good job that there was that new 16-valve 2-litre engine, as well as the improved 204 horsepower 2.9-litre Cosworth V6, and both could be allied to a new 4-speed automatic. Don't look too close at that new dashboard though that had been rushed through to market. The instrument cluster came from the Ford Galaxy, and the wood was actually a plastic wood called Timberlex that Ford designers nicknamed Timbollocks. At Jack Nasser's behest, the team had thrown away a class-leading dashboard that was only 2 years old with something that was arguably worse. An unloved car has terrible depreciation, and it didn't help that early Scorpios had poor reliability. A fully loaded model could lose half its value in just over a year, and most cars were fleet buys driven by those who had few options. But it meant that if you could stand the looks, a nearly new Scorpio represented very good value for money. From the driver's seat, where you couldn't see the exterior, that seemed like a good deal. But you'd have to survive the endless ribbing from your friends down the pub. There was a small update in 1997 with darker headlight surrounds. The front indicators shrank, the grille was modified a little, and there were new taillights, but the public had made up its mind. Ford withdrew the car from sale in 1998. Some German Ford dealers imported station wagon versions of the Ford Taurus as a replacement, but customers weren't keen. It would take another year for the sort of replacement to arrive, the Jaguar S-Type, but that car had its own styling problems. Ford added another luxury string to their bow with the purchase of Volvo in 1999. They had the well-received S80 with classic looks that moved the Swedish company on from their boxy image. Ford had decided there wouldn't be another Scorpio, but there was one last roll of the dice. What if a compelling case could be made for a new car, and what platform would it use? There was the North American Ford Taurus, but that didn't have the refinement to compete against Europe's finest. Then there was the new Jaguar S-Type Lincoln LS platform. That would require almost a brand new car that was beyond Ford's budget. But what if they could take the award-winning Mondeo platform and stretch it? That might just work. The styling work fell to one of those stylists that Ford had pulled from America to work on the previous Scorpio. Gert Horonester was German by birth and a fan of cars from his homeland, so his new Scorpio would use Mercedes styling cues to take Ford upmarket. Ford also tapped Ian Callum, who just produced the stunning Aston Martin DB7. Ian decided to make something with Audi design cues, but something that was still a Ford. Both models were put forward to management, but they were up against more than each other. They were competing for funds against another project, a new coupe to replace the Ford Probe. That was also based on the Mondeo platform, and it was easier to make a coupe work with it than a large luxury car. Cars like the Scorpio are longer and it's easy to stretch a platform, but to get the proportions right, they also need to be wider, and there's the challenge, just as Volvo, who were forced to use the Mondeo platform for the third generation V70. The car just didn't look right and sales faltered. Another problem for the Scorpio team was the Mondeo was front-wheel drive, something that just didn't sit well in this category of vehicle, although maybe the new Scorpio could have been exclusively all-wheel drive. It would certainly have made it stand apart from the competition. Ford went with the coupe. They felt it stood more of a chance of turning a profit. It launched as the Ford Kuga in Europe and the Mercury Kuga in North America. Ford's large luxury car was no more. With the Scorpio, Ford had asked their stylists to push the norms to create something striking. Their promotional videos tried their best to sell a car Ford knew wouldn't do well, but all prospective customers wanted to see were shots like this. After all, when your car's described as looking like someone's just rammed a banana up its bottom, then you know you've got problems. Many of Ford's other designs like the Mondeo and the Focus went through endless design reviews. This could have resulted in a shape that became too bland, something designed by committee, but at Ford it did the opposite, honing in on something exceptional. The Scorpio was created quickly by a smaller set of people and then tinkered with at the end until the original vision was lost. If Ford had stuck with a more classic look like this design from early on, then maybe the public could have accepted and even embraced the low rear light cluster that would have added a bit of styling flair. But those front headlights and gaping grille meant that it didn't matter what the rest of the car looked like, the Scorpio was going to lose. Ford stumbled in the mid-80s by creating a Granada Scorpio hatchback that customers didn't want. The 1994 Scorpio was the nail in the coffin. Ford had wanted to show their stylist could still do great design. The Scorpio did quite the opposite, but they would be vindicated just a couple of years later with the launch of the Ford Focus, a car that did the inconceivable. It topped the all-conquering Escort. The Scorpio is a cautionary tale for all car makers. Stylists need to keep checking in with outsiders to ensure what's being designed is something that will sell. As I mentioned at the start, there's much more in-depth information about the history of Ford of Europe in the 70s, 80s and 90s in Steve's Secret Fords books, the ones behind me. And he's also got a reprint of his excellent The Cars You Always Promised Yourself, which is also worth a look. See the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.